Barcelona, August 2021. A man is crying in front of cameras watched by the entire world. Lionel Messi, the greatest player in the history of football. Sitting behind a table bearing the crest of the club that raised him from the age of 12. And he is crying. The world read those tears as grief. I read them as evidence. Because those tears say nothing about loyalty. They say nothing about football. They say everything about what happens when a financial fraud finally collapses, and the victims are forced to sit in front of cameras and pretend it was a tragedy of fate. It was not. It was a balance sheet. But here's what nobody told you. While Messi was sitting at that table crying, one man in Barcelona was quietly collecting a salary of 800,000 euros per week. Not per year, not per month, per week. And he had just scored 35 league goals across 3 entire seasons. Average numbers, extraordinary compensation. Signed off by a president who knew the club was already drowning, and chose to keep spending anyway. That is not a football story. That is a crime story, and it goes much deeper than one bad contract. Because while the debt was exploding, Barcelona's own president was secretly paying a firm to attack Lionel Messi on social media, to destroy his reputation, to protect a chair with fan money. Stay with me, because this video will show you exactly how the most famous football club on the planet transformed from a religion into a debt machine, and who is collecting the payments right now. Josep Maria Bartomeu. Say that name to a Catalan fan and watch their face go cold. But do not forget one thing. Bartomeu did not look like a villain. He looked like an accountant. Quiet, loyal, safe. And that is precisely why he was so dangerous. He became president in 2014, at a moment when the club was winning everything. 3 consecutive La Liga titles, the Champions League, the Club World Cup. Barcelona was rewriting the history of sport with tiki-taka. Bartomeu did not need to do anything, and he did everything wrong. Every gambler's brain works the same way. When you are at the top, you do not think about risk. You think about how to double the bet. Bartomeu inherited Messi, Suarez, and Neymar, and instead of consolidating, he started spending. Neymar left in 2017 for 222 million euros to Paris Saint-Germain. A rational president would say, fine, we rebuild, we save, we trust La Masia. Bartomeu said, we replace him, at any cost. Ousmane Dembélé, 135 million euros. 20 years old at the time, had never played at world level. Injury after injury. Philippe Coutinho, 160 million euros. A good player, but not Neymar. He was never going to be Neymar. Antoine Griezmann, 120 million euros. Signed after a year of public drama, first refusing the move, then arriving, and never fitting the system. Combined, over 400 million euros. For 3 players who together never delivered a single Champions League title. But that is still not the worst part. The worst part is what Bartomeu was doing with fans' money behind their backs. Does the name i3 Ventures mean anything to you? It should not. That was by design. i3 Ventures was a small digital marketing firm. Modest, unremarkable. And between 2017 and 2020, Barcelona paid them over 1 million euros from club funds, from the money fans spent on season tickets, from sponsorship money. In exchange for what? In exchange for smearing the club's own legends on social media. FC Barcelona, a club that has existed for over 120 years, was paying outside contractors to anonymously attack Lionel Messi on Twitter and Facebook. Gerard Piqué, Pep Guardiola, Xavi, their own icons. Why? Because Messi was becoming too loud, too influential, too dangerous to Bartomeu's chair. And so the club president, instead of addressing the financial catastrophe closing in on him, was spending millions on digital black ops directed at his own players. This scandal became known as Barcagate. It broke in February 2020, when an investigative team at the Spanish newspaper El Mundo published documents proving the payments. Bartomeu denied everything, then apologized, then resigned. But the damage had been done. And I am not talking about the reputational scandal. I am talking about what Barcagate revealed about the mental state of the club's leadership. This was not a club being run by professionals. This was a paranoid regime spending money to suppress internal opposition, while debt grew by tens of millions every single month. Now let us look at the numbers. Not to bore you, but because numbers are the only thing that cannot lie. Act 1. The wage bill. In 2020, Barcelona's wage bill stood at €671 million per year. For context, total club revenues that same year? Approximately €715 million. The maths is simple and brutal. The club was spending 94% of everything it earned on salaries alone. UEFA recommends a maximum of 70%, and that is already considered the danger zone. Barcelona was operating in a different universe. And now the specific numbers that nobody says out loud. Antoine Griezmann was earning approximately €800,000 per week. Not per month, per week. That is over €40 million per year, for a player who scored 35 league goals across 3 seasons at Barcelona. Average output, average numbers, extraordinary compensation. Bartomeu signed that contract, because a gambler does not think about costs. He thinks about how it will look at the press conference. Act 2. The transfer that was not a transfer. Summer 2020. The club needs money. It needs it quickly. And it needs the accounting to look clean. The solution? Cynically brilliant. Barcelona and Juventus agreed to a player swap, Arthur Melo, to Juventus for €72 million. Miralem Pjanic, to Barcelona for €60 million. On paper, 2 separate transfers, 2 transactions, 2 entries in the books. In reality, a swap of 2 players that neither club genuinely wanted. Why did they do it? Because under accounting rules, you can book transfer income immediately, but spread the costs over the length of the contract. Barcelona therefore reported €72 million in income on paper, while the actual cost of Pjanic was distributed across 4 years. The books looked cleaner. Reality did not change. Pjanic spent 1 season at Barcelona like a ghost, 30 appearances, 0 impact, then moved on. Arthur was no better at Juventus. The result? 2 average players swapped jerseys, 2 clubs swapped numbers in spreadsheets, and everyone pretended it was a footballing decision. It was not. It was an accounting trick designed to conceal how close the House of Cards was to collapse. Act 3. And then COVID hit, and the House of Cards caught fire. March 2020. The Camp Nou went silent. Matchday revenue, gone. Hospitality, gone. Tourism, gone. For most clubs, this was painful. For Barcelona, it was catastrophic. Their entire model depended on a constant inflow of cash to service a mountain of debt. The moment that inflow slowed, even slightly, the entire structure began to shake. By the summer of 2021, the numbers were impossible to ignore. Net debt, €1.35 billion. La Liga financial fair play limit, drastically reduced. And in June 2021, the inevitable happened. Lionel Messi left FC Barcelona. Not for money, not for ambition, because the club simply could not register his contract under La Liga's financial regulations. The greatest player in the history of the club, arguably in the history of the sport, walked out of Camp Nou not because he wanted to leave, but because Barcelona could no longer afford him. There's a place 10 minutes from Camp Nou. It is called La Masia. Farmers built it in the 18th century. Today, it is the most famous football academy in the world. Xavi Hernandez came here as a child. Iniesta came as a child. Messi came as a 12-year-old boy from Argentina with a hormonal disorder that no other club was willing to treat. Barcelona treated it, raised him, and he became the greatest player in the history of sport. La Masia was not just an academy. It was a philosophy. It was a promise made to parents who brought their children hundreds of kilometers from home. Your son will be taken care of here. He will become someone here. And then Bartomeu arrived, and La Masia became an ATM. Let me explain what that means in practice. Football accounting works differently from almost any other business. When a club buys a player for 100 million euros, it does not book that as an immediate expense. It spreads the cost across the length of the contract, say 5 years, so 20 million euros per year. This is called amortization. But when a club sells a player, particularly an academy player whose book value is close to zero, the entire transfer fee is recorded as income immediately. All of it. At once. That is a gold mine. Especially when the end of the financial year is approaching and the books are showing a loss that would cause a scandal. And that is exactly how Barcelona began treating La Masia. Not as a nursery of talent, as a vault you raid whenever you need to plug a hole. Consider the case of Marc Bartra, academy product, centre-back, solid player, sold to Borussia Dortmund in 2016 for approximately 8 million euros. Why? Because Barcelona needed to report income in June 2016. Not because Bartra was not good enough. Not because anyone in the boardroom actually wanted to sell him, but because the fiscal year was closing and the numbers did not add up. Consider Sergi Samper, a midfielder regarded as one of the most promising Spanish talents of his generation. Sold. Gone. Today he plays in the third tier of Spanish football. And then there is the case that is most symbolic of all. Pedri. Wait, Pedri still plays for Barcelona. That is true. But do you know what the club did in 2021 when it needed to reduce the wage bill to register players? It extended contracts, while simultaneously reducing players' book values through financial restructuring. And the youngest academy players? They were first in line when savings needed to be made. They were not sold, but they were used, as pawns in an accounting chess game, moved around according to what the board needed to report at any given moment. Picture a family that inherits a vineyard. Generations built it. They planted trees. They waited years for the vines to bear fruit. They passed the secrets from father to son. And then one member of the family, a gambler, begins cutting the trees down, one by one, selling the wood to pay his debts at the casino. The trees do not bear fruit immediately, but the wood has immediate value. That is how Bartomeu treated La Masia. He cut down the trees, sold the wood, and told everyone the vineyard was fine. Between 2015 and 2020, Barcelona generated over 200 million euros from selling academy players. 200 million euros. For players the club had invested years in raising. For boys who arrived as children, believing in the promise that the club would build them into someone great. Some of them did become great. Somewhere else. In other jerseys. For other clubs. And Barcelona used the money from their sales to pay part of the amortization on Philippe Coutinho. Let that land. They sold the future to pay for a past mistake. Then they made another mistake, and paid for it by selling more of the future. That is what a spiral looks like. That is what an organization looks like when it stops thinking about tomorrow, because today it needs to survive until tomorrow. But all of this, barcagate, the reckless transfers, the academy sell-offs, was only a symptom. The real disease ran deeper, and it had a name. Structure. Because when Bartomeu finally left, in October 2020, under the pressure of a vote of no confidence, the entire world assumed the worst was over. It was not. The worst was still coming. And it was coming dressed in a suit, with a smile, and a promise of salvation. His name was Joan Laporta. Joan Laporta had been Barcelona's president once before, between 2003 and 2010. That was the golden era. Ronaldinho, Guardiola, Messi, the Champions League. Laporta knows how to win. He knows how to behave in front of cameras. he knows exactly what fans want to hear. And in 2021, he told them precisely that. We will save the club. We will return to the top. We are Barcelona. The crowd applauded. Fans wept with relief. I looked at the numbers, and the numbers said, this is not a rescue. This is a re-leveraging. Let me explain what the economic levers actually are, and why they represent one of the most dangerous financial instruments any football club has ever deployed. In 2022 and 2023, Barcelona activated 4 so-called levers. Levers 1 and 2. The sale of 25% of Barcelona's television rights for the next 25 years. The buyer? An American investment fund called 6th Street Partners. The price? Approximately 667 million euros across 2 transactions. That sounds like a lot of money, because it is a lot of money. But here's the part Laporta did not mention at the press conference. Barcelona sold 25% of their television income for 25 years. That means every single year, for a quarter of a century, 1/4 of everything La Liga sends Barcelona in television rights flows directly to the offices of 6th Street in New York. 6th Street is not a charity. 6th Street is a fund managing over $75 billion in assets. Their sole function is to generate returns for their investors. And the return they expect from Barcelona? Analysts estimate the effective interest rate at between 10 and 12% per year. Let us do the math quickly. Barcelona currently receives approximately 160 million euros per year from La Liga television rights. 25% of that is 40 million euros. 40 million euros every year for 25 years. That is 1 billion euros paid back on money the club already received today. 6th Street will earn more from this deal than Barcelona received. The mathematics always work in favor of the lender. Always. And now consider this carefully. Fans who are born today, children who received their first Barcelona jersey for Christmas, will grow up supporting a club whose television income will, throughout their entire childhood and adolescence, be partially flowing to an American investment fund. They did not sign those contracts. Their parents did not sign those contracts. Bartomeu signed the crisis into existence. Laporta confirmed the terms. And 6th Street will collect the payments. Lever 3. The sale of a 49% stake in Barça Studios, the club's production division responsible for documentaries, digital content, and global media projects. Buyer? Private investors. For approximately 100 million euros. Lever 4. The sale of part of the assets belonging to Barça licensing and merchandising. Again, a portion of the income from jersey sales, toys, and licensing deals leaves the club. Gone. Laporta presented all of this as genius. I see it differently. This is not a business rescue. This is a fire sale of the family silver. The silverware, the candlesticks, the paintings off the walls. You are selling everything of value to pay rent on a house you cannot afford, and telling yourself you saved the family. And then there is the stadium, Camp Nou, built in 1957, home to 99,000 fans, a cathedral. In 2022, Barcelona announced it would be renamed the Spotify Camp Nou. The fee? Approximately 280 million euros over 4 years from a Swedish streaming platform. And the stadium renovation? Espai Barça, a project with an estimated budget of over 1.5 billion euros. 1.5 billion euros to renovate a stadium by a club carrying over €1 billion in debt. Where does the money come from? Loans. bonds, bank credit lines. Goldman Sachs is involved in financing Barcelona's bond program, alongside other creditors. Pause on that image. A club whose name was for decades a symbol of Catalan culture and independence, now has a Swedish technology corporation's logo on its stadium. Its television rights are partly owned by an American hedge fund. Its bonds are held by Goldman Sachs. Més que un club. More than a club. Today, it is more than an asset generating returns for the global financial sector. Laporta stands in front of cameras and says, "We are back." And he is right. Barcelona are playing in the Champions League. Signing stars. The fans are happy. But who actually won? Who is the real winner of this story? That answer comes now. Give me 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Because I want you to understand one thing before this video ends. FC Barcelona is a fan-owned club. A socio, a club member, has voting rights. They can elect the president. They can attend the General Assembly. On paper, Barcelona is one of the last democratically governed institutions in world football. That is the story Barcelona tells about itself. Now let me tell you the story the balance sheet tells. 1/4 of Barcelona's television income goes to 6th Street. A portion of merchandising revenue goes to private investors. A portion of media rights income goes to further creditors. The stadium renovation will be financed through bonds, whose interest payments will drain the club's cash flow for decades to come. Goldman Sachs, 6th Street, private equity funds. These people do not vote for Barcelona's president, but every month they receive payment, regardless of whether the club wins or loses, regardless of whether Pedri plays brilliantly or is injured, regardless of what any single one of the 140,000 socios wants. A contractual obligation does not feel emotions. You know the story of the man who sold his soul to the devil? He got everything he wanted. Fame, money, success. But the contract had no expiry date, and the devil, patient, silent, invisible, simply waited. Barcelona sold a piece of its soul to 6th Street, a piece to Goldman Sachs, a piece to every creditor who arrived at the right moment with money in hand. And every year, those pieces generate interest. Quiet, systematic, relentless. Conservative estimates put Barcelona's current annual payments on interest, debt service, and financial obligations at between 200 and 250 million euros per year. That is over 650,000 euros per day. Every day, including Sundays, including Christmas, including the day Lamine Yamal scores a goal the entire world shares on Instagram. Fans share the joy. 6th Street collects the payment. And now the stadium, Espai Barça, 1.5 billion euros in construction costs. Add financing interest, and realistic estimates of the total cost exceed 2 billion euros. When it is finished, it will be extraordinary. 80,000 seats, glass facades, state-of-the-art technology, and its name will belong to whoever pays most for the naming rights. Today, Spotify. Tomorrow, someone else. Fans will buy tickets. Tourists will buy jerseys. Television viewers across the world will watch the matches. And from every single euro that enters that ecosystem, a portion leaves immediately. To creditors, to funds, to banks. Barcelona did not go bankrupt in the sense that it ceased to exist. Barcelona became the perfect debtor. Perfect because it is too famous to fall, too large, too symbolic, and the creditors know this. So who does Barcelona belong to? The socios? On paper, yes. In reality, less and less with every passing year. The players? Players come and go. Catalonia? Catalonia can be proud, but pride does not service bonds. Barcelona belongs to its creditors. It belongs to funds that have never watched it play, to bankers who cannot name a single player on the roster, to algorithms that automatically deduct monthly payments from the club's account. Més que un club. Today, that is a line on a marketing banner. In reality, Barcelona is an asset, generating cash flow for people who never loved it. And the saddest thing about this entire story? The fans still come. They still chant. They still cry at goals. And a portion of every ticket they buy goes to New York. This is not a story about Barcelona. It is a story about every club that believes it is too big to be governed by the rules of mathematics. It is a story about every institution, in football, in business, in government, that confuses prestige with financial health. And it is a warning, because after Barcelona, there will be others. They are among us right now, spending money they do not have, selling the future to pay for the present, signing contracts whose consequences will be felt by generations not yet born. And we watch their matches and applaud. Watch the numbers. Always watch the numbers. If this video changed the way you see football or business, subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what story you want covered next, because the next one is already waiting. Manchester United, the Glazers, and the biggest financial heist in the history of English football. See you there.